Written in the 1930s against the backdrop of the Great Depression-era Britain, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit began as a simple bedtime story for children. However, it grew into a profound reflection on the comradeship Tolkien experienced as an officer in the First World War.
The story follows Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit content with his lazy, comfortable life, until a wizard suddenly thrusts him into a grand adventure with 13 dwarves.
At its heart, the book is about finding the courage to take that daunting first step out of your front door. What begins as a reluctant trek through dangerous lands to reclaim mountain treasure from a dragon becomes a journey of transformation.
As Bilbo battles alongside his new companions, he discovers that the hardest part of any legendary quest is simply choosing to leave the safety of home behind.
Ooh.
The seed themes I focused on are friendship and adventure. In The Hobbit, Tolkien suggests that real friendships and meaningful connections are formed when people step outside their comfort zone and face their challenges together. This connects directly to the heart message of the novel, having the courage to take the first step on a journey. At the beginning of the story, Bilbo is deeply attached to comfort and routine. When Gandalf first suggests adventure, Bilbo immediately rejects the idea, saying, "We are quite plain folk and have no use for adventure. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things make you late for dinner." This line shows how strongly Bilbo values safety and predictability. At this point, he cannot imagine choosing risk, danger, or uncertainty, let alone friendship formed through those experiences. As the journey progresses, however, adventure begins to change him. This transformation becomes clear when Bilbo speaks to the Elven King and refuses the chance to stay somewhere safe and comfortable. Instead, he says,
"I don't think I ought to leave my friends like this after all we've been through together."
the hobbit who once feared leaving home now refuses safety. Because loyalty matters more than comfort, shared danger has turned companions into true friends. The importance of this connection reaches its emotional peak in Bilbo's final conversation with Thorin. As Thorin asks for forgiveness, Bilbo responds with humility and gratitude, saying, "I wish to part in friendship with you. I'm glad I have shared your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves." By the end of the journey, Bilbo values the experience and relationships he gained more than the treasure or recognition. Today, this message is especially relevant in the age of social media. Online spaces make it easy to form quick, surface level connections, but many of these relationships remain temporary and shallow. Tolkien's message reminds us that real, lasting friendships often grow from shared experiences in the real world. Stepping outside our comfort zones, trying new things, and facing challenges together, just like Bilbo. The courage to take the first step does not only lead to adventure, it also leads to human connection.
One of the most prominent themes in the fantasy novel The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien is the spotlight of trust and friendship. Throughout the novel, there's a prominent theme that trusting strangers can take a lot of courage but can ultimately lead you on a journey. This is just a smaller component of the overall message. Tolkien emphasizes that the first step out of an adventure requires immense courage. For example, before the journey had begun and Bilbo was still wary of the dwarves and the possibility of adventure, as he heard his guests begin to sing, the music created a feeling of the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and a jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. This was his first step into trusting these dwarves. Through their music, they began to open his mind to the idea of adventure. His limitation that was keeping him stagnant was his unbending opposition towards the new. The trust he placed in the dwarves helped him to overcome this. Another instance of his trust in strangers was nearing the end of his adventure when Bilbo had to rescue the dwarves from an elven prison. He had hatched a plan to put his party in barrels and float them through a nearby river. Bilbo tried his best to close in the holes of the barrels and to fix on all lids as safely as could be managed, hoping against hope that his plan would come off. Bilbo had come full circle in his journey to having the dwarves trust him in spite of the danger. Overcoming their fear and having a faith in Bilbo kept them from perishing. Bilbo's first step had led them all the way to prospering during uncertainty. Bilbo's journey mirrors the lack of effort youth in 2026 exhibit to have new experiences and their immense increase of time spent on screens. In the modern age, teenagers are spending around 7 hours on their screens daily. This has caused a significant decrease in the time high schoolers are spending exploring or socializing. In conclusion, the friends Bilbo makes at the beginning of his journey help him learn to trust strangers and himself. From the beginning, he had been terrified. However, he grew through his new friendships to become much more courageous. He had to overcome so many mental barriers to come so far. He accomplished feats that he or any of his kind would not have attempted, and he was all the more happier afterwards.
In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, the seed themes of adventure and courage are consistently present throughout most of the book. adventure and courage that only come from leaving one's comfort zone, like the main character Bilbo Baggins did. Early in the book, Bilbo tells Gandalf that he is not at all even slightly interested in adventure by saying this: "We are plain and quiet folk, and have no use for adventures, nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things." Bilbo uses the stereotypicality of most hobbits to convince himself that he doesn't want to go on any sort of adventure, that he does not want to venture outside of his own comfort zone that he's been in his whole life. Eventually, Bilbo does go on this adventure with Gandalf and a variety of others too. And even though he wishes he were back in the safety of his own home, he shows he can persevere by saying to himself, "Go back," he thought. "No good at all. Go sideways, impossible. Go forward, only thing to do. On we go." This shows how, even though he could have given up, left back to the hole he lived in where his old routine was guaranteed to not have any danger, no adversity, he persisted and moved onwards through dangerous times of fear and peril. Near the end of the book, Thorin notices how far Bilbo has come in terms of courage and persistence. Thorin says to Bilbo, there is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom." Bilbo, after going through this adventure outside his comfort zone, has come out the other end braver, stronger, and far more content with himself and his accomplishments. Overall, Bilbo was only able to go on this grand adventure where he gained courage never seen by the likes of any other hobbit because of that initial push from Gandalf. Bilbo always had the small bit of courage to go on that adventure. He just needed a little push to send him along the path towards adventure and courage.
Another integral thematic concept observed in The Hobbits is the relationship between greed and friendship. Tolkien exposes how greed can blind one from the true value of friendship, a blindness which leads to the deterioration of one's friendship. To begin, Thorin's obsession with his gold and disownment of Bilbo reflects this blindness towards his friendship. Upon casting away his friend Bilbo, Thorin recognized his flaw when he told Bilbo that if more of us valued food and cheer and song above gold, it would be a merrier world. Thorin initially prioritized his gold and treasure over his relationship with Bilbo, a relationship and friendship he discarded because of his gold, until he relearned friendship's true value upon reflecting on the elements of friendship. Choosing friendship would cause him to lose gold to the elves and lake people. Thorin's action is similar to how Elon Musk, despite owning a lot of money, still got disowned by his daughter in court. Conversely, Bilbo showed a lack of greed, thus prioritizing his friends over himself. This was demonstrated when he helped his friends escape the elven prison through barrels, but forgot he was not in a barrel himself, nor was there anyone to pack him in. Bilbo, unlike Thorin, was due to adventure, the ambition towards treasure. He lacked greed towards gold and was focused on helping his friends. This lack of greed allowed Bilbo to truly know and appreciate the value of friends. This mirrors how the firefighters in the 9/11 attack risked their lives to go up the World Trade Center to help people escape the building when they themselves risked their own lives, even dying themselves. Bilbo's strong sense of friendship is also seen prior to partaking in any adventure, as Bilbo was doing his day-to-day business around his house. He saw and eagerly greeted Gandalf. "Good morning." And he meant it. Bilbo complacently doing his daily routine shows that he lacks the greed to take action and take more than what is given to him. A lack of greed, which fueled his enthusiasm into greeting Gandalf, a long-time family friend. This enthusiasm shows Bilbo values Gandalf as the true friend he is. This is similar to how religious people eagerly greet each other at church because they are happy to see each other. Greed continues to blur friendship to this day. In a world where human connection is readily available, there easily develops friendships as there is greed. People will cheat and scam each other for money in the form of swindling off Tinder. There also exists many families suffering from domestic violence, where a parent's greed stemming from alcohol, gambling, or plain anger are blinded towards the value of their family. These are just two of many examples today of blinding friendship stemming from greed. It truly takes courage to grow out of greed. Only then can the journey be fulfilled with the full presence of friends.
In the deep mixture of adventure, courage, friendship, greed, and mistrust, a greater theme shows its face.
Tolkien's novel The Hobbit teaches us that courage is the gateway to journey. With a little courage, one can achieve great feats in ambition.
It takes courage to look beyond greed and mistrust. Once beyond those things, one can gain friends and gratifying journey called life.
Only with courage, this journey will follow. We are all called to be like Bilbo.
Woo, the end.